This is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Belle Gibson? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So I realized the name of the person that I'm looking at in today's video is Belle Gibson, and that sounds a lot like Mel Gibson, but those, of course, are separate people. I realize they're both associated with Australia, and that only adds to the confusion. But Belle Gibson was a con artist, again, Belle, B-E-L-L-E, and Mel Gibson was the road warrior. So, again, quite separate. First, I'll go through the background. It's brief here in this case. I'll move to the timeline of the incidents, and then I'll offer my analysis. Belle Gibson was born in Tasmania, Australia, on October 8, 1991. When she was 12 years old, she went to live with a classmate and then later with a friend of the family. She went to high school but then dropped out. In 2008, she moved to Perth, then to Melbourne in 2009. She had a child in 2010. In August of 2013, when she was 21, she introduced a mobile app called The Whole Pantry. This was supposed to represent some type of wellness movement, like some of it was based on selecting certain foods to eat. The app was very successful, reaching over $1 million in sales in a year and a half. Before she enjoyed this success, she started to make claims in 2009 that she had a number of physical health problems and only had 4 months to live. For example, looking at the problems, she said she had various varieties of cancer, including kidney, liver, uterine, spleen, blood, and brain cancer. She claimed that a vaccine caused the cancer. She said that she had multiple heart surgeries and a stroke. She claimed that she died briefly on the operating table on 2 separate occasions. Now, I realize in this case she specified with the word briefly, but in general, whenever somebody tells you that they died, you always know how the story is going to end. It's like, let me guess, you didn't. There's no such thing as a self-report death. It's one of those things that just doesn't go along with the term self-report. Gibson published a book at the end of 2014. At this time, she said that the cancer was stable over the last 2 years. She gave credit to alternative treatments. A substantial number of survivors of cancer and survivors of other illnesses followed her story. Reading updates on social media about her progress, they were given hope. She claimed that conventional medicine had failed her. She stopped conventional treatments in order to pursue treatment based on determination, nutrition, and love. Some people, however, were skeptical. I wonder why. Actually, there were a number of reasons. They noticed something was off about her story. A few things stood out. For example, she didn't have any scars from all the surgeries that she claimed to have. She was unable to provide any of her physicians' names, and she told different versions of her story. Like instead of the cancer being stable, she said it had spread to other parts of her body. Gibson had made claims about alternative healing strategies that were known to be dangerous, such as drinking raw milk, refusing to get vaccinated, and a discredited dietary-based cancer treatment called Gerson therapy. Gibson claimed that she had raised a substantial amount of money and donated it to charity. She would use the name of various charities to raise money, but then she did not donate the money back to them or enough money back to them. Despite this, she identified herself as a philanthropist. I guess it was a new donation-free type of philanthropy, like philanthropy light, perhaps. Eventually, it came out that she had only donated $7,000 of the $300,000 she claimed to donate. When her deception was exposed, she claimed that alternative medicine experts had tricked her into believing she had cancer. In April 2015, Gibson was interviewed by the Australian Women's Weekly. She admitted that none of the cancer claims were true. She suggested that her mother had neglected her and forced her to fend for herself from a young age. So it's really not clear how that connects to her lying behavior. I guess she's suggesting that because she had a very difficult time when she was young, that caused her or facilitated her becoming deceptive. In June of 2015, she gave an interview to 60 Minutes Australia. Much of what was covered in the interview intersects with other parts of the narrative I'm covering here in this video, but there are a few things that really stood out to me that I wanted to mention specifically. Gibson claimed that a man identifying himself as an immunologist visited her home and assessed her using a box with lights on it. This box apparently measured frequencies. He diagnosed her with brain cancer. So this was not at a physician's office like she had said originally. Now it was in her home. This man treated her, and she really believed that she had cancer. She changed her story about why she stopped conventional treatment as well. Now she was saying it was because she was pregnant. She claimed that she had endured emotional trauma and was stalked. She said that there was no reason for her to lie now, and it's not something she wanted to do. Interestingly, both of those things could be true and not lead to any change in behavior. There was no reason for her to lie, and it might not be something she wanted to do, but either way, it was what she was actually doing. She denied having factitious disorder or being a pathological liar. When she was asked her age, she would say, "I believe I am 26. Other documentation indicated that she was 23. She proclaimed that she is the real victim because people lied to her about her having cancer. Gibson was found guilty of misleading and deceptive behavior and was fined $410,000. She failed to pay the fine. Her residence was raided on January 22, 2020. Assets were seized to pay that fine. Gibson announced that she had been adopted by an Ethiopian community in Melbourne and had volunteered there for 4 years. The community denied that Gibson was associated with them. Now moving to my analysis. In looking at Gibson's story, what we see here is a person who repeatedly lied, but has an excuse for everything. In one sense, she's kind of admitting she lies, but in another sense, again, she has some type of explanation that meant that she really didn't lie, or it was okay that she lied. It gets kind of confusing. According to her, she was the victim. She was lied to. She was tricked just like everyone else. So there is no admission by Gibson of doing anything wrong. It's the victim mentality taken to an extreme. It also exposes a weakness in the victim mentality. Anyone can claim to be a victim even without evidence. In a way, Gibson, perhaps unintentionally, is offering a bit of social commentary. As far as her fraud, a lot of people wonder how she was able to deceive so many people when she was saying she had cancer, and they wonder how there are still people who believe her now. There is a lot of variability here. Different people were fooled for different reasons by different lies at different times. So it is a bit complex. Her appeal was to more than just one group. Here are a few examples of situations and how the deception occurred. Her deception of cancer survivors is fairly straightforward. It's easy to understand why cancer survivors would look at somebody like Gibson and want to show their support. I don't think many cancer survivors support her at this point. The next group that was deceived were people who were vigorous about alternative remedies. Again, it is easy to understand how someone in this group would be excited about Gibson. In theory, she was verifying what they've been saying for a long time. They believe that alternative treatments and remedies are helpful, and Gibson's situation seemed to prove that. After the fraud was revealed, the vast majority of people in this group abandoned Gibson, which doesn't necessarily mean they've given up on alternative treatments. It just means they've discounted Gibson's specific claims. Very few people in this group, however, have not given up on her. For that small group, the subset that still believes in Gibson, a lack of critical thinking skills could be at work here. She has stated that she does not have cancer. What did the alternative treatments heal? If there was nothing to heal, how can somebody still believe what she was saying before? This is a case of simply believing what one needs to believe. It's not really about logic or reason. For this small group, Gibson became a bit of a cult leader. The dishonesty of her claims was never an issue for them. This group didn't care if she was telling the truth or not. They were simply there for the message. The other group that she tricked was the general public. Again, it's understandable. She did have an amazing story. When the fraud was uncovered, the public, for the most part, withdrew their support and added their condemnation. This takes me to the next question. What could be going on in a situation like this? As I mentioned, Gibson denies having factitious disorder or being a pathological liar. She very well could be correct. I don't know what she does or does not have as far as disorders. It could be that she simply intentionally decided to conduct a fraud, that she lied only specifically about that which would allow her to gain financial reward. Some people are not as convinced. They look at her and think there's no way she had the intellectual ability to pull off such a massive fraud. With that in mind, the question becomes, how do you differentiate between factitious disorder, other disorders like personality disorders, or someone just choosing to be a con artist? Again, not specifically relating to the case of Gibson, but just in general. Is there a way to figure out what's going on in a situation like this? When someone commits a fraud, the most obvious explanation is that they are lying because they wanted to achieve some type of reward. A con artist is someone who tricks other people into believing something that's not true. Con artists are everywhere. This is not a rare occurrence. Sometimes, but not all the time, con artists may be narcissistic and/or psychopathic. For example, a number of people with narcissistic and/or antisocial personality disorders are con artists. This is actually one of the key features of antisocial personality disorder specifically, engaging in low to mid-level fraud. Of course, there are always people that take that to the higher level. Most people who engage in fraud know they are doing something wrong, and they know why they're doing it, even though they might have personality traits which facilitate the behavior. Now, looking at factitious disorder, is this a possibility? Could that be going on in a case like this? Could a disorder like this explain fraudulent behavior? Technically, it could, but it's not the first thing that I think of when I hear about somebody conducting a large-scale fraud. Factitious disorder has two types, imposed on self and imposed on another. Sometimes the disorder is also called Munchausen syndrome. When someone is saying that they are sick when they're really not, the one that comes to mind, of course, would be imposed on self. The imposed on other type is when the person pretends that another individual is sick. Usually this is a child. The person is still getting sympathy because people believe the child is ill. And of course, with their relationship to the child, people extend that sympathy to them. The reason that factitious disorder is not often connected to those committing fraud is because the disorder is really about gaining empathy and sympathy. Sometimes that can lead to money, but defrauding people out of money is not the object. That is not what typically happens with factitious disorder. Here are some of the typical characteristics of those who have factitious disorder. They often have extensive knowledge of medical terminology. They often have an extremely long history of medical and/or mental health visits, so they seek treatment frequently. Some of them literally go to 5 or 6 physicians or mental health clinicians for the same symptoms or made-up symptoms. Their motivation is unconscious, but their mechanism of fabricating symptoms is conscious. So they don't know why they're pushed toward the behavior. They don't understand that, but they know that they're lying to treatment professionals. The lack of insight is not complete. Rather, it is isolated to the motivation component. One could say that this is self-deception. They are lying to themselves. If both the motivation and the mechanism components were unconscious, this is more associated with somatoform disorder. With that disorder, the person is not doing anything to cause the symptoms. The symptoms are actually being experienced. So the symptoms are real. There's just no explanation for them outside the realm of mental health. So factitious disorder is different from somatoform disorder in that way. So as we can see, those who commit large-scale fraud would rarely have something like factitious disorder. Most of the time, this is simply intentional behavior to make money. Those who commit these types of crimes often continue or try to continue for their entire career, never accepting responsibility, never admitting any type of wrongdoing. Moving back to the case of Belle Gibson, Gibson really went overboard with her claims of illness, almost like she didn't realize that people may be skeptical. She would have had a much better chance of success if she had been more straightforward with her narrative. But this type of deceptive behavior is connected to a lack of empathy. She couldn't put herself in the shoes of the public to realize that her claims would not be well received, to realize that people would look at her and think, wow, that seems like a lot to be going on that just happens to line up with her taking these alternative remedies. Gibson's behavior hurt a lot of people, especially cancer survivors and their relatives. Giving people false hope is one of the worst manipulation-based offenses someone can commit. Gibson was preying on people because they were vulnerable. She selected them for that reason. She picked them because they were searching for hope, because she knew that they would be very receptive to her message. Even the most hardened criminals throughout the ages would have to be envious of her complete lack of empathy. So I guess there is at least one group out there who she can still impress. Those are my thoughts on the case of Belle Gibson. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.